Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It Live, where we deep dive into the conversations women should be having about their hormones, but often don't. Joining me for this conversation is the founder of Healthy Home, Dr. Amber Grasse.
Hi, Lindy. How are you today?
Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for always making time for these calls. They're so invaluable to our audience and, of course, to me as well. So, thank you for being here. Dr. Amber is certified in hormone health and has a doctorate in energy psychology. And so, her insights are just invaluable to us. Today, we're jumping into a topic that I think a lot of us have been asking about. We see this in the chats and we know it's been requested. So, today, we're diving into women's sexual health and how menopause impacts that. We're also going to talk about andropause. This is male menopause. So, as women, as we're going through this, at the same time, our significant others may also be feeling symptoms of menopause. And so, we want to talk about what we can do, what's happening in the household, and things that we can do as we're all experiencing these changes in life. So, first, we're going to ask Amber the question about sexual health in women. Talk to us a little bit, Amber, about how many women are impacted during this time.
Well, thanks, Lindy. This is such a massive subject. This is a subject everybody thinks nobody's talking about, but everybody's talking about. And first and foremost, sexual health is health, period. And so I don't think people quite correlate that, but this is huge. There's up to 84% of women who are going through perimenopause or menopause have vaginal dryness. Like 84%, that's huge. Over 50% are experiencing decreased sexual desire and, a self-loathing of their body image, which just makes me sad. And that's why we're doing these calls, right? Over 60% of women say they no longer feel attractive. Nearly 60% of postmenopausal women experience painful intercourse, and only 25% are saying that they're seeking help. And I'll talk a little bit more about that today because I would say that number is a lot bigger than what the statistic says, and we're going to hear more about that later.
Okay, wow. So, with the decline that you're talking about in women's progesterone, estrogen, and all of these things that are happening to us, how does that show up physically in our bodies?
Yeah, you know what? Balancing our hormones is so critical, and we're learning that on these calls, right? But estrogen keeps our vaginal tissues lubricated. And so a decline leads to dryness, itching, thinning of the vaginal walls, which is called vaginal atrophy. You might have heard that word, and people are like, what is that word they're talking about? But that is one of the reasons why intercourse can be so painful, which is traumatic for women. It leads to the breakdown in their physical and emotional well-being and the connection with their family. So less estrogen can alter nerve function in the body, and that leads to less sexual responsiveness. It also has a reduction in our blood flow, why prime is so important. But less progesterone is also impacts our sleep, our mood, irritability, anxiety. And so all of these psychological effects, they start stacking on top of one another. You got to start thinking weight gain, hot flashes, sleep disturbances, fatigue, loss of identity. I mean, it really starts to have a huge emotional and physical well-being effect for women.
Wow, it just reminds us how important it is to take care of ourselves, that self-care, self-love. We've talked about it on previous episodes. I love that topic and it reminds us how important that is. The other thing we want to talk about, and I mentioned it at the top of this call, is it's not just women that are going through this. So men are also experiencing hormonal shifts. We've talked about the term midlife crisis. I think we all know what that means. And I definitely have experienced that with my husband lately. And so, talk to us about what's happening in men's lives during this time.
Yeah, you just nailed it. I mean, as women, we'll go, oh my gosh, I think I'm not alone. My husband's going through this. And the fact is they are, but very few people even know this. We might joke and say, oh, it's menopause, right? For men, but it's actually called andropause. And it happens for men between ages 40 to 60. So 30 to 40% of men over the age of 50 experience symptoms such as anxiety, depression, irritability, fatigue, loss of muscle, hair loss. These are things that get associated, but sexually they're very distinct what they're going through at this stage in their life. And you're right. We hear, they all of a sudden, get it, they buy a new car they're going through a midlife crisis. It happens for both men and women, right? Because our identities are shifting a little bit. And it used to be chalked down to aging, but we realize we have the vitality to live a very long life now. So that's not the case. But for men, it can show up as reduced libido, like a reduction in their desire and their interest, their lack of interest, said differently, right? It's erectile dysfunction, weight gain, hair loss, poor body imaging, anxiety, depression, mood swings and fatigue. And so, these are not so uncommon for what women are going through. Now, obviously, it's a very big distinction. Women, it's the end of their fertile lives. But for men, they really are having a huge amount of emotional, physical symptoms at this stage of their lives, too.
Maybe this isn't the right word, but there's something reassuring about that, like knowing that they're going through it with us at the same time, or at least that we're not alone. You kind of feel seen, right, and heard as a woman. Like, okay, there's changes not only happening in my body, but also in my spouse's or significant others. So, talk to us a little bit. There's so much noise out there about this topic. How do we separate myths from facts? And then do you feel like people are still kind of looking at this as something like you got to tough it out, or do you feel like they're going out there and seeking help?
Yeah, such a great question. I actually, when I got to attend the Harvard Medical School about estrogen and balancing hormones, it was really, really eye-opening. There were just some incredible, like, people who are experts in their zone of interest. And I got to listen to a doctor called Dr. Jewel King. She's a professor of medicine, but she talked about sexual health, and that's her kind of specialty. And she talked about myths and facts and what actually has been done statistically proving what's out there. So we all think nobody's talking about it. But the interest is there, and this is important. So 85% of men and women want to talk to their sexual provider. So that's your doctor, your naturopath, your homeopath. They want to talk to them about their sexual well-being. Okay, so that's huge. 85% of them want to, but 90% of them would prefer that the doctor initiates it. And that's just not happening because doctors believe that they don't want to talk about it and it's uncomfortable. So I'm so happy that we're bringing this education to the field. 94% said that sexual enjoyment was important to their emotional and physical well-being. Like 94%, so that's huge. And the thing that we need to understand is sexual problems are common for both men and women. 43% of women are going to have issues and over 31% of men. But here's what's interesting about the stat. 43% of women, the most impacted were ages 45 to 64 years of age. So that's right dab in the middle of perimenopause and menopause. And so this is such an impactful topic. It frustrates me to no end. I'm having more and more conversations with women saying, we need to educate the women that are coming before us, right? Like, these younger generations need to know what is happening to their bodies. And we're going to talk about a little bit more next week, but there are massive impacts to our bodies that get changed from puberty into menopause. So I'm so happy we're having this conversation.
Wow. So those statistics are very eye-opening. And it's, listening to how there's all these changes happening in both men and women's lives. They're both trying to process them. They don't feel like they can talk about it. It's really putting a strain on their relationships. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us how that's impacting the family and maybe some takeaways that people can use as they know they're going through this.
Yeah, so they actually coined a coin about what's happening to the impact for men and women and their marriages and their relationships at this stage. It's called the hormone divorce connection. Can you believe that? We actually have a word for it because it's becoming so huge now in the world. 73% of women in one study said that menopause contributed to their marital breakdown. 73%. That's huge, right? Over 60% of divorces are initiated by women aged 40 to 60. So again, right in that middle, they're losing their identity. They're starting to say, hey, I'm no longer, I'm no longer fertile. I'm no longer the girl I was yesterday. Who am I today? And does this person that's in my life belong there? And really, it's the hormonal imbalance that's causing so much of this breakdown, for emotional breakdown. And as we just heard, for men and women, in fact, divorce rates now peak for couples between age 45 to 49 years of age. Again, right in that impacted point. and with an average age being 43.9 years for women and 46.4 years for men. And so again, we're seeing this, like what the impact of not having our hormones balanced, what it's doing. It's a breakdown in our own bodies. It's a breakdown in our identity. It's a breakdown in our physical and emotional well-being. So no wonder you're kind of, with intercourse being painful and all these changes happening in our body, of course, you feel like you're doing this alone. And of course, you're going to not feel like having desire or wanting to be with your partner.
Wow. There's so much we can say about this topic. There's so much more that I want to hear from you. So, with that being said, this is going to be a two-part series. This is not the end of this conversation, just the end of the call for today. We want you to join us next week, next Thursday. We're going to continue to dive into this with Amber and really get these insights that she's providing to us and really understand this topic. So, Amber, are you joining us next week to talk about this again?
Yes, I'm so excited to bring this to a two-part series. When we started diving deep into this, I was like, man, there is so much more. Like, there's a part of women are going to lose a part of their anatomy at this stage of their life. And I'm like, what? The world needs to know this. And then I'm going to provide solutions for your physical and mental well-being at this stage and how to move forward with these changes. But it's just so critically balanced our hormones. So thanks for having me here today, Lindy.
Okay, thank you so much. We will see you next week and we'll see all of you as well. Thank you.
You guys.